Hello, everybody. It's time for new GYN Garage. My name's Ed Pavlik, and I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, where a heat dome that had been sitting on us for more than a week has moved on. Yep, weather is comfortable in the 80s. My colleague today is,
Frank Lawton from London, UK, and we're sitting under a 30 odd degree centigrade heat dome as well. It's going to cool over the next couple of days, but it has been immensely hot. It's very interesting. If we were sitting on a beach in Greece or somewhere, this would be just very pleasant. But in a big city like London, which is not really designed for air conditioning, because we don't get many days like this, it is horrendously hot and very difficult, I think. I'm glad I'm not working.
wowza, Frank, you're really having hot weather. Uh,
This is very hot. Yeah, yeah.
I learned something about the United Kingdom, and that's that it's not right to call the match Wimbledon. Uh, you have to call it the champions or the tennis. Is that right?
Well, it's the All England club as well. I don't think people do call it Wimbledon. Actually, I think if you look at the news headlines, they'll say at Wimbledon today. So I think probably you're all right. Um, I we're very we don't care too much about it, to be honest.
Well, another term I picked up on is Scouser.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
well, tell me about that one.
Well, if you're a Scouser, you come from Liverpool.
I
And the derivation is scouse. Now, I might get this wrong, but it is a Liverpudlian delicacy. I think some sort of stew, and it's called scouse. And the scouser comes from this Liverpudlian delicacy. So the Beatles were scousers in the sense that they came from Liverpool. I don't. I think it's actually a term of derision now. You know, if you call someone a scouser, you're basically saying you're a Liverpudlian and you're not very clever. It has a slightly pejorative tone about it now. Rather like if you're from Birmingham, you're a Brummie. If you're from Newcastle, you're a Geordie. If you're from, I don't know, Scotland, you're a jock. Usually made in friendly terms, but I think if you're a Scouser, there's a slight pejorativeness there, if that's the right word.
I see. Well,
I'm glad we don't just discuss gynecology here. This is important.
right. Well, we're going to do gynec areas right now today, and we're going to consider a paper that talks about and ask the question, what's the risk of ovarian, breast, cervical, and uterine cancer to women in very warm climates, represented by the Middle East and North Africa? Answer to this question is approached in a paper that was in Frontiers of Public Health. And we're going to use information in our reviews today that we gained through Copilot AI. I'm going to summarize this first, Frank, and then give you the opportunity to give us some insights. The work makes the use of multiple regression to examine the effect of temperature on the prevalence and number of deaths due to the cancers of the breast, ovary, uterus, and cervix. Included in this analysis is the GDP per capita as a secondary independent variable. And the authors conclude that significant correlation exists between prolonged exposure to high ambient temperatures on all four cancer types. Frank, take it from there.
Whoa. This paper, it's almost the way I've interpreted it, it's almost like the author said, I wonder if there's a link between increasing ambient temperatures and the incidence of gynecological cancers. And it's almost they've been working backwards. And some of the data that they use, I think, is questionable. They've ignored data that would argue, I think, with their ideas. And I think the paper is very weak because of that. It's anyway, we can go through it. MENA is a region, a very large region, a population of probably 500 million or so, which stretches from the North Atlantic coast of Africa, Morocco, all the way across the North African coast of the Mediterranean, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, then up through the Levant to Lebanon and Syria, sometimes including Israel. Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, Sudan, sometimes Turkey. So it is a huge area with this vast population, and indeed a vast ethnicity as well, which I'll come to later. In the introduction, they talk about global warming is expected to rise by 4 degrees centigrade by 2050. If you actually look at some other data, I'm not sure where they get that data from, but the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change puts the increase between 1.5 and 2.5 degrees centigrade, 2.5 being the high end of their estimates. So although I think most of us we would agree that the Earth is warming, I'm not so sure that in the introduction that 4 degrees centigrade is actually true. It's interesting in the methods, and I'm not a great statistician, but they talk about prevalence rather than incidence. And I would have thought that prevalence is the burden of in this case, an illness. And prevalence is bound to increase if people are living longer with a particular disease. So the prevalence of ovarian cancer in a country where they happen to be able to improve the survival of ovarian cancer, the prevalence will increase. I'm not sure why they use this burden rather than incidence. Incidence would have been a much better indicator of the link between global warming and these diseases. And why the, they've not included many of the other factors associated with the development of these gynecological cancers, such as genetic problems with BRCA, particularly in the Middle East, fertility, the aging population, the ethnicity of the population. I mean, for instance, in Bahrain, 43% of the population are from Southeast Asia. They are not native Bahrainis. 12% of the population of Qatar are Qatari citizens. The rest are immigrants. And places like the United Arab Emirates, 7 million out of a population of 9 million are non-Arabs. So I think they've taken a very strange way of looking at the problem of the disease and also the other factors that might be associated with this. The cause of death is another problem. I don't know whether they get the cause of death from, but I assume it's from death certificates. But we know from other data that death certification in the Middle East is actually very poor. Something like 50% of cases in Lebanon, the death certificate does not actually say what is the cause of death. Many death certificates are not signed by a medical practitioner or a physician, so we don't really know the legitimacy of this. The other problem, of course, is that we don't actually know the numbers. They say that there's an increased risk, but we don't, because they haven't recorded the incidents, we don't know what those number of risks are. And the other thing, when it comes to the results, it's very interesting that they've looked at breast, cervix, ovary, and as I think we both looked at table 5, which says ovary, which actually I think is uterine they're talking about. But there are only two countries where there is a link between global warming, prevalence, and death. So the prevalence seems to increase and some the deaths seem to increase, but it seems to me that if you're trying to link the two, prevalence and death have got to be in the same column. Only 2 with breast, 1 in cervix, 4 with ovary, and 2 in Jordan. 2 in uteri, which means that out of those 17 countries, 12 or 13, they have recorded no link between increased temperature and prevalence and death. And I think that's rather suspicious. And interestingly, Qatar, which, as I said, has this only 12% of citizens are Qatari, appears in 3 of those 4 risk countries: breast, cervix, and ovary. I'm sure that I think that global warming is something that is happening. I'm not sure that this paper actually gives any indication that global warming per se has an effect on the incidence, not the prevalence, the incidence of gynecological cancer. It's interesting that they talk about global warming, but in 2024, 9 out of the 10 countries that are reported as increasing ambient temperatures were in Europe. They were not in the MENA countries. And if you look at the data, which I had, but the some of the countries within this, Syria and Iraq, the global temperature or the temperature has risen by 2 degrees since 1990, but in some it's less than 1 degree. So I'm not sure that bundling all these things together into MENA to get a huge number of cases is actually appropriate. I think this if someone says, if our role is to say we've reviewed this paper and you don't need to read it because it actually doesn't say very much, that's our role for this one. This is one of the worst papers I think I've ever reviewed.
Yeah, I'm pretty much with you, Frank. And my reason for that is I'm in a country where the number of people who announce that they don't believe in the climate change uh,
Oh,
is astonishingly large. And so we don't need to provide this type of information to them, which they can easily challenge. Um, one of the things I noticed doing some of the same things that you did was that you look at a country like Morocco, it's fairly cool, and it's on their list. Okay, and the other thing is with regard to temperature, if there's going to be mountains in a particular country, it's going to be cooler, and if there's a seacoast, it's going to be cooler, and so you have a patchwork of what's going on in a country, and do you really, where are the population centers, well, all of which is not really looked at. Um, I think the biggest thing that I would relate in reviewing it is if you had to pick out single factors and sort of deal with something like they've dealt with temperature, I'd want to know at the same time what's happening to family size. And if we look at family size in particular, which I will do in just a second, um, what we see is that we can see in the countries under surveillance here that the ovarian cancer in these hot countries is increasing. And this is information just Googled, okay, or more or less used uh, through an AI query. Uh, Morocco has these increase in ovarian cancer deaths. Greece does too. All these are warm countries. We get to a cool country like, or a colder country like the United Kingdom, we see ovarian cancer deaths going down. Same way with North America, same way with the United States, the same way with Canada. We can also look at Denmark, same way, cooler country, things are going down. Norway, things are going down, different sort of method of capturing data. But what we can look at also is there an opportunity to lose the protective effect of a large family? And that we can see now in Jordan as a hot country, the average family size has been decreasing over the period that's studied in the paper, the same way in Algeria, the same way in the United Arab Republic, same way in Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Once again, family size has been decreasing over the period studied in the paper, and Morocco is different. But once again, my point is that I believe that an important factor that was ignored was the effect of family size and losing the protective effect of large families here at the same time. So in the end, I hope this paper doesn't get too much attention because it can be easily criticized even more severely than probably you and I have done. And that's the long and short of it. I look forward to better papers appearing on this topic, and I believe that they're going to find the same results, but they're not, the definitiveness of finding those results is really at question right here.
yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I mean, the thing about the size of the countries and the various climates. I mean, there are some wonderful ski resorts in Lebanon. Turkey has lovely ski resorts. The mountains of Iraq and Iran. Everybody knows that there are mountainous regions over there because there were large nuclear facilities put under the mountains. There are fantastic beaches in Lebanon, and you can ski in the morning and go to the beach in the afternoon. I assume that the majority of these data come from cities if they're recording the temperature rather than in communities high up in mountains or close to water or seas and things like that. I think I would agree with you. I think I look forward to receiving or reading data that actually has a paper that actually has some data that is reproducible. And I think there's an awful lot of this paper. I don't know where they get the data from, and I think a lot of the data are wrong, or at least they are selective in the data that they've chosen. And that's not the way that these papers should be written.
Oh, well, we're in agreement. We've done another one and we'll be back in 30 days. Unless you melt or I melt with the
Well, yeah, I think it is going to cool. I think hopefully we shall see.
Okay, very good. Well, Frank, go to the beach while you still have hot weather.
Absolutely. Well, I still can.
I'll see you next month.
Okay, my friend. Nice to see you. Cheerio.
Cheerio.